This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ISICSB board meeting. Holly, would you please do roll call? And board members, if you would introduce yourself, the agency you represent, and we'll get started. Holly?
Can you hear me okay?
I can. You're a little faint, but if you speak up, that'll be helpful.
Okay. Wendy Hess, Travis Solom,
Present. Lee County Communications.
Bridget Edson,
Present, Chickasaw County EMS representing EMS.
Mindy Benson,
Mindy Benson's present, Blackhawk County Emergency Management, representing Iowa Emergency Managers.
Michelle Bischoff,
Present, representing Iowa Pro Chiefs, and I'm with the Des Moines Fire Department.
Curtis Wooten,
Present, representing Volunteer Fire Department, Lexbrook Fire.
David Ness, Dan Schaefer, Dan Fank, Jeff Vanderwater,
Present. Adair County Sheriff representing sheriffs.
Rhonda Broaddus,
Present, Marshall County Communications, member at large.
Anna Voss,
Present, representing the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy.
Cindy Height, Daniel Brown,
Present, representing Iowa Department of Transportation.
Michael Strausser, Keith Hope,
Present, Iowa Department of Public Safety.
Patrick Updike,
Present, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Blake DeRucci,
Present, representing Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management.
and Jessica Turbas. She won't be on. Is there any legislative members on the phone? Okay.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate everyone's time. We've got a fairly full agenda, so let's dive in. I will take an approval for today's agenda.
Travis, so move.
Benson will second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approval of the minutes from the June 8th meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion by Broaddus.
In a second. Was there a
Yes,
second on that
Travis.
as well? Oh, okay. I heard a second from Ness. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That brings us to the SWIC report. SWIC Nichols.
Thank you, Chair. The report this month is going to be light. You do have time still to fill out the StateCom nationwide survey. We will hear more about that a little later. Last month, right after our meeting, we had coverage testing in Henry County and Blackhawk County. Both of those testings went well and proved the robust coverage of the ISICSB platform. I don't have any upcoming testing on the calendar for the next couple months. The only other thing is that we have the goal to apply for the REM CDP grant That application deadline is July 28th. That is for a $2 million award for rural emergency medical communications. If we are awarded, that notification will happen in September, and we will keep you all apprised of the process there. And later in this meeting, we'll talk about our credentialing of INTDs, but that's all I have for now, unless there's any questions.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Or thank you, Swick. Next is the 911 Council Report and Program Manager Darushi.
Thank you, and apologies in advance. I'm going to take the Swick's time. A handful of things that I think are important for this group. They were discussed in the 911 Council meeting as well, but again, I think they're important for this group as well. So, a number of topics that seem to be on the surface unrelated. It's interesting when they start to merge. So if you take the topic of denial of service, abandoned or accidental 911 calls, and non-service initialized phones, and you combine those, you have a problem that we've encountered here in Iowa, as well as been experienced elsewhere in the nation. So, you know, when you disconnect your service on your phone, it can still reach 911. So when you give your phones to your kids or grandkids and leave that laying around the basement, that phone can still reach 911. That in and of itself can lead to issues and problems. But what we've experienced here in Iowa, and again, has been experienced elsewhere, is the smartphone devices and manufacturers have implemented emergency SOS type functions on their phone too. So when you drop your phone, it thinks you've fallen and it automatically calls 911. Or if you tap your phone 5 times, it automatically calls 911. So again, all of this is adding to a recipe of a larger kind of concern here. What we have experienced is, I think we've narrowed it down to a shipping container of a bunch of phones that are non-service initialized, so they don't have an actual phone number assigned to them anymore. It's not tied to a specific account, but as they are shipping to and fro around the country, and either forklift, or they're being moved, or they're being dropped on the forklift, those phones are triggering the emergency SOS feature and calling 911 in rapid succession, causing a denial of service attack. Now, again, the PSAP that experienced this in Iowa had this last for about 10 minutes, hundreds of calls. Same thing has happened in Utah yesterday, in Indianapolis, or Indiana, a couple weeks ago. And again, I think we're starting to narrow this down to the actual issue. So the FCC, the National 911 Office, NENA, APCO, they're all aware of the amount of abandoned and hang-up calls that have been triggered just by a human person not knowing that those features exist on their cell phone device. So they are working with device manufacturers to make those maybe a little bit less good, if you will. But so I'm really just trying to spread the word that this could be an issue that you experience. You know, that's kind of where all signs are pointing. When you listen to the background noises of what's going on in the 911 calls that are being made, also working with the carriers, and every single phone that's calling 911 in this fashion being the same exact device down to the color, you start to put some of these pieces together. So working with colleagues across the nation, working to get the word out, working with those national level organizations, wanting to make sure everyone is aware of a number of those topics that kind of, again, merged into this one singular topic here in Iowa a couple weeks ago. So if there's any questions on that, let me know. A couple other things of note. Talked in the past about 911 to 988 transfers. 988 is the former National Suicide Hotline. There's 2 of those centers in Iowa. We have been working with 3 PSAPs to roll out pilot transfers from 911 to 988. So if a 911 call, you decide it really is better suited for a mental health professional to be able to make that transfer. So the technology behind that is fairly easy. A lot of the discussion has been more centered on the best practices and the kind of the matrix of when you make that transfer and then what happens if it needs to come back to 911. So those 3 PSAPs are underway. We're continuing to fine tune the policy and best practices for the transfers. In the beginning of August, a survey will be going out to PSAPs to kind of gauge attitudes and readiness for additional go-lives to eventually roll this out statewide. But knowing that some might not want to be on the early edge of that, the survey will kind of help us gauge, where to go next after the pilot and, again, work towards statewide deployment. Finally, I know some people try to keep this in their mind of how many PSAPs there are in the state. There was one PSAP that consolidated Perry PD, folded into Dallas County Sheriff's Office, so there are now currently 111 primary PSAPs in the state. In late June, we held a webinar with GeoCom and with Department of Education on critical incident mapping, and that stems from the Governor's School Safety Initiative. If you are interested in kind of that topic of mapping of schools, the Governor's School Safety Initiative, any of that, indoor mapping, those webinars are posted on our Google shared site. You can watch those after the fact. Just let me know if you're interested and I'll make sure you have access. That concludes my briefing. Sheriff, I would take any questions.
Thank you, Blake. Are there any questions for Blake? All right, that brings us to committees. User group, Swick Nichols.
Yes, Chair Hess was not able to be here today, so there are no new applications to approve for today. And later in the meeting, we will look at adopting the new participation plan. The user group committee did a final review of that and advised it's ready for board approval. There are no other comments. And that's all I have unless there are questions.
Any questions regarding the user group? Finance, Chair Brown.
Thank you, Chair Bischoff. The Finance Committee did not meet. That meeting would have been on the 4th of July, and so I did review the finances. It was a quiet month from a financial perspective, and I think that is the conclusion of fiscal year 23, actually, as well. So with that, I would take any questions.
Great, thank you, Dan. Any questions for finance? Governance Committee, Chair Ness.
We bumped ours up a week and met on June 26th, and had preliminary conversations about some policies and also about the participation plan, but nothing is prepared for board approval today. That's all I have to report, unless there are questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Major Ness? Operations Committee, Chair Edson.
Yeah, we actually are meeting next week, so we have no new action items right now.
Excellent. Thank you, Bridget. Appreciate it. Any questions for the Operations Committee? Training and Outreach Committee, Chair Solom.
Yes, we met on the 22nd. We discussed the status board slides that we've been working on. We did an initial review, still more to do. We also talked about the COMT rescheduling. I think we decided that we were going to offer it to states outside of Iowa. Obviously, Iowa would have first preference on any seats, and approval for any out of states would be a last resort in an attempt in hopes to have a full class. Last I knew, we were still waiting to see when or if they would have an instructor available, and we would push out information after we have that. We also talked about any additions or changes to the Radio 101 how to use it and how to implement it with new users. Another thing that was brought up when we were discussing the status board was looking for adding a portal that allowed people who had forgotten their passwords or usernames. That's being looked into to see if that's something we can even add. And the INTD registration, the tactical dispatch registration, is open and live for people to get telecommunicators registered for that. That's all I got.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Travis and the Training and Outreach Committee? Great, thank you. Appreciate it. That brings us to the Technology Committee and Chair Updike.
Thank you. Kind of a rare situation. We didn't have a meeting we didn't have any meetings since the last board meeting because of vacations and holidays. So we'll continue to deal with the Part 90 eligibility topic and the on-system discipline-specific encryption. And other than that, new business coming up on the 30-day comment, and I'll get into that at that point. So that's all I got. Sorry it's so short. Thanks.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Any questions for Patrick and the Technology Committee? All right, that brings us to the FirstNet Broadband Committee and Chair Benson.
Thank you, Chair. I will try to keep in the same context as everybody else today, keep it short and sweet. The Broadband Committee met this week on Tuesday. We did not have any actionable items. FirstNet briefings will be provided by our AT&T partners a little later in the meeting.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mindy. Appreciate it. Any questions for the FirstNet Broadband Committee or Mindy? Great. That brings us to other reports and information sharing with board members. Does anyone have any information that they would like to share?
Sure, this is like one thing. I know we kind of took it off the agenda, but it kind of ties back to something that we had talked about previously. That's the CAD-to-CAD interoperability project. Just maybe a note for those that might be interested in that type of project or discussion. And again, that's kind of sharing information across CAD systems that are different vendors, different types. The National 911 Office also published a paper on that as well. It's on their website and accessible for anyone who may be in need of more information.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Are there any other sharing items? I have a couple just to keep everyone informed. The ARPA letter is still a work in progress. We're waiting on quotes from Motorola. We are working toward getting a meeting with the Attorney General's office to talk about the eligibility and the Part 90 and just how that all works, as Patrick has talked about in the past. So we're moving forward with getting a plan as to ensure that we're in good compliance. And in August, I just wanted to remind everyone that it is intended to be an in-person meeting. So we will all gather in Adele to have our board meeting. There still will be the link available, so if you're absolutely unable to join us in person, that will be acceptable, but please make all efforts to be in person. And have reached out to will be reaching out to the AG's office to see about having the board member orientation that the state has done in the past, that presentation be shared with us, as we have many new board members, and it's been those classes were suspended during COVID, so it's been some time since those classes have been offered. So it'd just be a good refresher for those of us that have been on the board for a while, as well as an opportunity to educate the new members of the expectations of being a board member. So those are things to look forward to. Are there any other items before we move on? ISICSB System Administrator Report. Scott Richardson or Connie Stuffelbeam?
Thank you, Chair. This is
Oh, fantastic. Thanks,
Scott. I'm present. My update will also be very brief today. There's no maintenance updates this month. That leaves us with ISICS numbers. Our radios currently stand at 33,198. That's up 95 over last month. Talk groups are at 3,055. That rose by 5 over last month. And our push to talks for last month stand at 2,764,264. And that was actually down by almost 90,000 over the previous month. And that is all I have.
Great. Are there any questions for Scott and the system admins? All right, that brings us to the FirstNet Authority, John Olson.
Good morning. Thank you, Michelle. On June 27th, the authority released the 2023 update to the FirstNet roadmap. I'm going to put a link into the chat for those that have not seen that or interested in that. This document comes as a result of significant consultation with public safety across the country to affirm that the key domains of that 2020 roadmap document were still valid, but to also identify key areas going forward that are of utmost importance to public safety. The three key focus areas in the 2023 roadmap are, of course, ensuring a dependable network, enabling critical technologies and features to ensure that responders are connected, and focus on evolving technologies needed by public safety and how we can take public safety's voice and influence that evolution. As you can imagine, coverage is king is a consistent message. Moving forward, the authority anticipates our board approving later this summer a process that the authority will use to address coverage needs heard from public safety in our future reinvestment initiatives. While we've not seen exactly what that process looks like yet, I'm confident that it will be a topic that will be discussed in this forum in the very near future. And while we're talking about the future, next week we will onboard a new public safety advisor for FEMA Region 7 states. We'll have an announcement forthcoming, and I would anticipate that the new SPSA will be at this meeting next month. In the past 15 months, I've been working with Iowa, made some great relationships with some really dedicated folks, and my stepping back from your state is bittersweet. I assure you that you'll be in good hands going forward, and that I'm not going away should you need anything. For my seat as the EMS program lead at the authority, I'll be in Des Moines at the Iowa EMS conference in November, and look forward to continuing the initiatives that we started for the state of Iowa. And with that, Chair, if there are any questions.
Great. Thank you for your service to the state of Iowa. We greatly appreciate it, and you will be missed. So thank you, John. Are there any questions for the FirstNet Authority and John? AT&T update, Tyler Richard.
Hello, everybody. Mark, looking for Tyler's on vacation. I do not have any major updates for you today, so any questions?
All right, any questions for AT&T and Bart? Great, thank you. Appreciate you joining. CISA update, Chris Myers.
Thank you, Chair Bischoff. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for allocating the time for me to speak briefly today. Do want to remind everybody that the SafeCom nationwide survey is still out there. It goes through July 21st for your submissions. You probably have received an email or at least heard about this over the last couple of months. This survey is super important. This data is collected once every 5 years approximately. It is aggregated together and it is used to make decisions that will impact services that agencies like CISA will provide to states. It also potentially impacts work products and possibly even grants. The goals, at least of mine as your ECC, is to try to make sure that rural states such as Iowa are appropriately represented. In the past, sometimes the rural states have been underrepresented in data collection services and drives such as this. This data has also been used in testimony on Capitol Hill to justify the existence of programs. So this survey is super important, especially since it's only done about once every 5 years. Now, collectively speaking across the nation, Iowa is currently doing very well with its response rates. You currently have 50 responses, which puts you at 11th nationally, which is fantastic. There are currently 81 in-progress surveys, and if all those in-progress surveys were completed, extrapolating that out, you would rank 10th, assuming everybody else does the same nationally. So you have a potential to make sure that you're in the top 10% of all states that are represented with the survey data. If you start thinking about the weight of those answers relative to other states, if you do complete your survey responses, the weight of those responses would be increased quite a bit. Just for perspective, you are within a handful of responses from states like California, Minnesota, Missouri, and Wisconsin. The one thing I want to point out is that California has a lot more people and a lot more agencies. And if your responses are on par with California and have the potential to exceed them, that makes sure that Iowa is represented very, very well nationally. Currently, nationwide, there's been just under 1,800 submitted surveys. There are currently 2,500 outstanding surveys that have been at least partially started, which brings the grand total to just under 4,300. The survey responses, even though they seem relatively small nationally, they do carry significant weight, especially when you start thinking about the needs of Iowa and the other Region 7 states of Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. There may be some similar needs there, and if every other state pulls their weight the same as Iowa, the products, services, and potential grant opportunities will start being slanted towards what's needed in rural states. So once again, this survey closes July 21st. I would encourage every agency that received an email from us to take the survey to complete it. And if you have not yet completed it, please do so by the 21st. On the next slide, I do want to point out a cybersecurity advisory that was just released that talks about advanced persistent threats that are targeting Outlook Online. This may not seem like that big of a deal at face value. However, if you think about the immense amount of information that is stored in your online Outlook Exchange servers, there's potential there for a significant data breach when it comes to data being exfiltrated from those environments, and that is what's happened elsewhere. This cybersecurity advisory is widely available through our website. If you want it direct, I can send it to you. And this thing is geared more towards your information technology and security professionals. I'm assuming that most organizations have someone that is tasked with that, so this is the perfect thing for them. It gives them things that they can do to make sure that you're protected, and also on how to identify if you potentially have a problem. And a lot of it goes down into auditing the logs that are associated with your Exchange server. And again, this applies to everybody that is or may be using Office 365. One last thing is if you do find any suspicious activity on those types of services or devices, please report that activity to CISA and the FBI. One last slide, regional things of note. I do want to point out to the group that the interoperability markers data gathering will commence in August. This will be the last year of the current model. Historically, Iowa has done very well with this assessment, as Iowa tends to be very progressive when it comes to interoperability. And we will be working on that data gathering in August. Next year, we will be moving to an updated model of the markers that will encompass more parts and pieces of interoperability that may be a little bit more subtle. But that isn't quite done yet, but once I have awareness of what it'll look like next year, which will probably be sometime around Q4 of this year, I will let the group know. Otherwise, that's all I have, Chair Bischoff. I can go ahead and take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate all the information. Are there any questions for Chris? Chris, I just have one, and you can get back to me if you don't know the number off the top of your head. Do you know what the number of the N for the survey, how many surveys were sent out?
I know that from our data service that we use to try to identify points of contacts for agencies, I want to say the number was somewhere around 5,000 or 6,000, but don't quote me on that. That number may be a little bit low. But I would suspect that the standard behavior after receiving an email like that and verifying that it's accurate is to open the link and see what it looks like, and then perhaps close it. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yep. Thank you. All right, that brings us to old business. Is there any old business for the board that anyone has? All right, brings us to new business. Approval of new applicant participation from SWCNICL. Do we have any? Oh, the application form. I'm sorry, I should read the whole agenda item. The application form, SWCNICLs, if you would carry this item.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So this is the application participation plan that's been out there. The prior one was built in Excel, and really the only changes are the format and adding this front page that kind of explains the process a little bit, as well as adding in some language directly from standards that are referenced in the community or the participation plan. The real change was the original participation plan had 3 additional signatures required on it, and those were not necessary. They're not used currently, and so those are what has been taken out. So this has been through committee, and all of the recommended edits have been put in place. And I believe that this will be user-friendly and beneficial for the user group committee when they're reviewing these before they bring them to the board. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions on this particular form or why it looks the way it does.
Sure. Thank you so much. I will entertain a motion, and then we can have discussion.
Nessa move.
Okay.
Edson
Is there any
seconds.
discussion? I'm sorry, we need a second first.
Edson will second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you for your work on this, Haley. Much appreciated, and all the committees that reviewed it as well. Approval of a 30-day comment on 700 conventional channel update with discipline-specific encryption. Chair Updike, could you introduce this topic, please?
Yeah, thanks. So the Technology Committee has been working on this discipline-specific encryption topic. Specifically, in this case, would be off-system conventional resources. And so currently we have in the ISICS 217A form, we have 3 frequencies listed in the 700 megahertz band that are called ITOC channels. And so this document, this 30-day comment document, addresses that. The suggested change was to change the name of those 3 ITOC channels. And then we also went through some of the last 6 available frequencies that could be licensed. And so the end result is that we are looking to change the names of the 3 existing frequencies and add 6 frequencies with the same naming convention that's a little bit more standardized instead of being called an ITOC. And then as you read through this, hang on, sorry about that, my phone was ringing. So as you read through this, you can see that the names are given to each of those channels, and then it's laid out by law enforcement and encryption SLN. And so we want to put this out here and have those people who have an interest in this to go through this and say what you like or don't like. And should there be any, angst with any of this, then we would run it back through committees after the 30-day comment period. So we're really, we really want your input on this because it's set up so that you have discipline-specific encryption on those individual channels for certain functions. Hopefully that didn't muddy the waters too much.
And I presume that this will, the method in which people could comment on this will be on the ISICS board website and through that same process with things comments being logged and collected so that they can then be digested and applied to the document to move forward with a plan based on comments received, correct?
Right, and a couple other things. So the 6 additional frequencies have not been coordinated or licensed. So even though if we come back in 30 days and nobody has any issues with it, we still have to get those, we have to make a recommendation to, which will go to the board, we'll make a recommendation to get those additional frequencies licensed. We will not update the ICS 217A form until all of this is completed. It could be that if we don't get those additional licenses or those additional frequencies licensed, we would update the 3 existing with the new naming convention for those. So, yeah, it kind of creates a programming issue going forward because you would have to rename it, but I guess that would be up to the users as to when they would want to update that if they wanted to at all, but that's the plan.
Do we have any indication as to that? I mean, I believe that we've reached out to the coordinating body, and these frequencies, at least in premise, are available.
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Okay. I mean, so at least we're positioning ourselves well, but there are some formalities that we must go through.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So it's not for people to assume that because we're talking about it now that you can start using these because, you know, there's requirements for licensing. So.
Correct. Thank you. Patrick, did you have anything else?
I think that's it. Thanks.
Yep. I'll entertain a motion to send this document out for 30-day comment.
Ness, I'd make a motion and just express appreciation to the technology committee for their work leading up to this.
In a second?
Vote in a second.
Is there any further discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you for your work on this, Patrick. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item is to award some credentials.
Thank you, Chair. So today we have 3 INTDs for credentialing. INTD is an incident tactical dispatcher, and that's a specially trained person qualified to operate away from their dispatch center in a command post, base camp, or right out of the incident scene. They leverage the multitasking, communications, accountability, and documentation skills of successful telecommunicators to provide public safety communications expertise and support at planned events and extended incidences such as hostage situations, multiple alarm fires, search and rescue operations, bombings, active shooter incidents. Some of the things here in Iowa you might think of are the Marshalltown tornado, the Parkersburg tornado, and the recent building collapse are some of the situations where they would be called out. So I am proud to present 3 of my former coworkers these credentialing today. Are you taking pictures of them? Are you taking pictures?
I got you over here.
Yeah. Oh, Scott. Okay. Okay. So first one, Tiffany Ives, Marshall County Communications Center. Get a picture. Congratulations. Thanks. Thanks for the hard work on it. Thank you. Second up, Caitlin Reineke, Marshall County Communications Center.
Gotcha.
Hold on. Oh. And last but not least, Shanna Wagner, Marshall County Communications Center. No longer get to work night shifts with Shannon, but it's good to see her once in a while. Thank you. Congrats to all. Thank you.
Congratulations to you all. Let's give them a round of applause. Great. Thank you so much for putting forth the effort to get this credentialing, and thank you to your leadership for affording you the opportunity. Greatly appreciated, and the state of Iowa will use your resources. That brings us to public comment. Is there any comments from the public? All right, hearing none. We sit adjourned. Thank you all for your time and your efforts.